Hello, everyone. Please join me for the story of a sister-in-law who set me up in a hotel with another man, then brought the whole family to catch me in the act. But when the door swung open, I played a video of my mother-in-law and brother-in-law that made her collapse in shock. The third-floor hallway of the city's most luxurious hotel, usually a corridor of hushed elegance, erupted into chaos, sounding more like a packed marketplace. At the center of the pandemonium was the door to room 309, where I was staying. Outside, my sister-in-law, Jessica, was delivering an Oscar-worthy performance. Dressed in a flimsy nightgown, her hair a mess and her eyes red and swollen, she was using all her strength to bang on the door while screaming the most venomous words. "Grace, you open this door right now. You shameless, cheating tramp. How dare you cheat on my brother and disgrace our family name?" Her voice, a shrill mix of glee and fury, echoed down the hall. Behind her stood a formidable crowd she had painstakingly assembled. There was my husband, Kevin, his face ashen, frozen like a statue, his eyes glued to the wooden door with an agony he couldn't hide. My mother-in-law, Carol, was flanked by a few gossiping aunts, one hand clutching her chest as she sobbed. "Oh, dear Lord, why has this misfortune befallen my family? We welcomed a snake into our home. How can I ever face our friends and neighbors again?" Whispers and murmurs rippled through the crowd, their curious and scornful gazes piercing the door to my room like thousands of sharp needles. They were all waiting for the main event, the grand finale of catching a cheater in the act, something to gossip about for weeks to come. They were waiting to see me in my most pathetic state, dragged out into the light with a strange man. Inside, I allowed myself a small smile, a cold and enigmatic one that no one outside could see. I rose gracefully from the plush armchair, smoothing the silk of my dress. I glanced in the mirror, ensuring my composure was perfect, not a hint of panic in my eyes. It was time. The play that Jessica had so meticulously directed was about to reach its curtain call. But the one who would decide the ending wasn't her. It was me. I took a deep breath and walked slowly toward the door. I felt no fear, my heart beat with a strange and steady calm. I knew that in just a few moments, this entire chaotic scene would detonate in a way no one could have ever predicted. Click! The door to room 309 slowly swung open. The hallway fell silent. All eyes were on me. With a triumphant look, Jessica lunged forward like a moth to a flame, ready to storm the room and find my lover. But she stopped dead in her tracks. My husband, my mother-in-law, and everyone else froze. Their eyes widened in disbelief. Inside the luxurious suite, there was no strange man. There was no messy, post-coital scene they had imagined. The only thing that greeted them was a neat, pristine space, and in the center of the room, a large-screen TV, glowing and waiting. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms, a smirk playing on my lips. "Looking for someone, Jessica? Why did you bring the entire Collins clan here and cause such a scene?" My voice was as light as a breeze, but it made Jessica shudder. She stammered, her face turning pale. Where is he? Where did you hide him? I saw you come in here with a man," I chuckled. "You mean this man?" I held up my phone. On the screen was a picture of me talking to a man in a hotel staff uniform. "This is the maintenance guy who came up to fix my air conditioning. Do you need me to call him back up for questioning?" Jessica was speechless. She knew she'd been caught in a lie, but her stubborn nature wouldn't let her back down. You're lying. You already let him escape." "Kevin, what are you waiting for? Go search the room." "I bet she's hiding him in the closet or the bathroom." Kevin, my husband, after a moment of stunned confusion, was about to step inside as his sister commanded, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Hold on," I said, my voice turning icy. "Since everyone went to all the trouble of coming here, you shouldn't leave empty-handed. I don't have a strange man for you to see, but I have something else, something 100 times more interesting. Please, come in." I stepped back, making way for them. Driven by curiosity, the crowd pushed their way into the room, gathering around the television. Jessica and Carol also entered, their eyes still filled with suspicion, wondering what trick I was about to pull. I said nothing more, simply pressing the play button on the remote. The TV screen flashed to life. A video began to play. The setting was all too familiar. It was my mother-in-law Carol's bedroom. And the two main characters, naked and entangled on the bed, made everyone in the room gasp in horror. One was Carol, my supposedly dignified and righteous mother-in-law. And the other man was none other than Mark, Jessica's husband, my brother-in-law, Carol's son-in-law. The air in the room thickened, time seemed to stand still. The only sounds were the ragged breaths of the onlookers and the sordid noises coming from the television. Disgusted whispers began to spread among the relatives. Carol and Mark stood frozen, their faces drained of all color. They stared at the screen, then at each other, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Their depraved, incestuous affair was laid bare for the entire family to see. But the person in the deepest shock was Jessica. She stood there, her eyes so wide they looked as if they would fall out of their sockets. She looked at the mother she had always revered, then at the husband she loved, performing a graphic sex scene right before her eyes. The truth was too cruel, too horrifying, far beyond anything she could bear. "No. This can't be real. This isn't happening," she shrieked, turning to me with a crazed look. You faked this video to frame me." But those were the last words she could utter. The immense shock overwhelmed her. She staggered, her eyes rolled back into her head, and her body went limp, collapsing onto the floor. Unconscious. Her adultery bust had ended with her own spectacular downfall, and tonight, the gates of hell for my husband's family had officially been thrown open. And ladies and gentlemen, the story we are about to follow, while containing dramatic elements enhanced by technology for entertainment, carries at its core a powerful message about the limits of silence and the power of truth. Sometimes, silence is not golden, it is complicity with evil. And when the truth is revealed, its explosive force can be more devastating than any bomb. Please stay tuned for what happens next. Jessica's final scream before she fainted still echoed in the terrifyingly silent hotel room. Her sudden collapse was like a spark that ignited a real explosion of chaos. The relatives, who had been stunned into silence, finally snapped out of it and rushed to surround Jessica. "Jessica! Jessica, wake up! Somebody call 911. Quickly!" The shouting, the frantic footsteps, the urgent tapping on phones all blended into a cacophony of noise. Amidst the turmoil, the two stars of the video, Carol and Mark, remained rooted to the spot like wax figures. They were completely stripped of their ability to react, standing there and enduring the dozens of gazes now fixed upon them. But those gazes were no longer filled with curiosity, but with disgust, contempt, and judgment. My husband, Kevin, was the first to break free from his stupor. He rushed to his sister's side, shaking her violently, but to no avail. Then he looked up, his bloodshot eyes staring at his mother and brother-in-law. "Mom! Mark! What is this? What is going on? Somebody please tell me this isn't real." His voice trembled, breaking as he clung to the faint hope that this was all just a mistake, some kind of cruel joke. It was then that Carol seemed to wake up, the self-preservation instinct of a seasoned manipulator kicking in. She stammered, desperately trying to conjure up a ridiculous explanation. It's her. It's Grace. She faked the video. She used some kind of editing software to frame us, to tear our family apart. Don't believe her, any of you." She pointed a trembling finger at me, trying to shift all the blame onto my shoulders, just as she and her daughter always did. Mark quickly joined in, his voice just as shaky. "Yes, that's right. She hates Jessica, so she came up with this disgusting trick. We're innocent. We've been framed." Their clumsy performance might have fooled a few naive souls, had I not decided to deliver another fatal blow. Without a word, I turned off the video. The TV screen switched to a different interface, an audio file of a phone call, clearly displayed. I pressed play. "Hello, is this Leo? This is Jessica." Jessica's all too familiar, sharp voice filled the room. "Yeah, this is Leo." "What's up, Jessica?" A strange man's voice replied. "How are things looking for the job I asked you about? Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. sharp, okay?" Just go to room 309 at the Grand Star Hotel, my sister-in-law will be there. You don't have to do much. Just go in, take off your jacket, and sit and talk with her for a bit. Remember to act friendly. I'll handle the rest. Once the job is done, I'll transfer you the other $5,000. Remember, not a word of this to anyone. The recording ended. The room was plunged into silence once more, but this time, the silence was even more terrifying. Every eye in the room, now filled not just with disgust but with pure outrage, turned towards Carol and Mark. Their victim act had completely crumbled. The ironclad proof pointed directly to the mastermind of the entire affair, the one who had hired someone to frame her own sister-in-law, none other than Jessica, who was currently unconscious on the floor. Carol. Did Jessica? Did she really do this? One of the aunts spoke up, her voice trembling. And you and Mark, that video? Was it real or fake? Carol was cornered. She couldn't explain why her daughter would need to hire someone to set me up if I were truly a bad wife. All logic was against her. I decided to answer the question myself. The video is 100% real, Auntie, I said, my voice firm. And the reason I have it is simple. I knew about Jessica's entire plan beforehand. I recounted everything clearly. I explained how I had become suspicious of Jessica's fake friendliness over the past few days, how I had discreetly checked her phone when she left it on the table and read all the messages between her and the man named Leo. Knowing her scheme, I decided to turn the tables. I secretly contacted Leo and told him the truth, that he was being used to frame someone, an act that could have legal consequences. I offered to pay him double what Jessica had promised if he would cooperate with me, pretend to go along with her plan, and provide me with the recording of their call as evidence. Leo, an amateur actor in need of money, immediately agreed once he knew the truth. As for the video of my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, I paused, looking directly at Carol and Mark. Well, that's a longer story. A story of lies and depravity that has been going on for a long time in our very own home. And I thought tonight was the perfect time for everyone to finally learn the truth. Just then, paramedics and an ambulance crew arrived. They placed Jessica on a stretcher and rushed her away. Kevin, after his daze, hurried after them. He left without a single word to me, without even a glance in my direction. His mind was likely a tangled mess, not knowing who to believe, not knowing how to face this horrifying reality. Once the ambulance was gone, the crowd of relatives also began to disperse. They left with disappointed shakes of their heads and hushed whispers. They had seen more than enough drama for one evening. The room was now empty except for me, Carol, and Mark. The chaos had passed, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Carol slumped to the floor, no longer crying or screaming, just sitting there, her eyes vacant, staring into space. Mark stood pressed against a wall in the corner, his head hung low, trying to avoid my gaze. The velvet curtain that had concealed the rotten core of this family had been ruthlessly torn down by me. That night, City General Hospital became the stage for Act 2 of the family tragedy. Jessica was admitted to the emergency room, while the rest of us, the remaining family members, sat scattered on the cold waiting room chairs. No one spoke. The air was so heavy you could cut it with a knife. Carol huddled at one end of a bench, shivering occasionally. Mark sat at the other end, the distance between him and his mother-in-law now as vast as the poles. They didn't dare look at each other. Shame and guilt had erected an invisible wall between the two accomplices. I sat on a separate bench across from them. I didn't feel tired, nor did I feel triumphant. Inside, I felt a strange emptiness. The war I had been quietly preparing for had erupted exactly as I had planned. But why did this victory taste so bitter? I had overthrown my enemies, but in doing so, I had also destroyed the place I once called my family. Kevin was the most restless, pacing back and forth in front of the emergency room doors, his face a mask of anxiety, confusion, and a terrible internal conflict. He was the most pitiful and also the most blameworthy person in this story. He was trapped in the middle, on one side, the sister he loved. On another, the mother he revered. And on the third, the wife to whom he had once sworn his vows. But now, all the most important women in his life were on opposing sides, and the naked truth proved that the wife he had doubted was the only innocent one. Around midnight, a doctor emerged from the ER. "Who is the family of Jessica Collins?" Kevin rushed forward. "Doctor, how is my sister?" "The patient is out of immediate danger," the doctor said. "She suffered a severe psychological shock that caused her to lose consciousness. We've given her a sedative and IV fluids. She's stable now but needs to be monitored. Family can visit, but please remain quiet and avoid causing her any further distress." Hearing that Jessica was okay, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. But that relief was quickly replaced by an unavoidable confrontation. Kevin turned around. His eyes were no longer filled with disappointment for me, but with a deep, questioning gaze directed at his mother and brother-in-law. "Mom. Mark. Can you two explain this to me? That video, and that recording. What is going on?" Silence. Carol hung her head, her shoulders shaking. Mark still stood like a statue, not daring to utter a word. Their silence was the clearest confession. Kevin looked like he was about to lose his mind. For the first time, I saw my timid husband truly enraged. "Say something. Why are you silent? Mom, do you have any idea what you've done? That's Mark. He's Jessica's husband. Your son-in-law. And you, Mark. How could you do something so beastly with your own mother-in-law? Are you even human?" Kevin's accusations were like daggers stabbing into the guilty silence, but he was met with nothing but more terrifying quiet. Helpless and furious, Kevin turned to me. He walked over, his eyes a mixture of complex emotions. "Grace. I'm sorry. I didn't believe you. But why did you do it this way? Why did you choose to expose everything in front of all our relatives? Don't you know you've destroyed this entire family?" I looked up at him, a weary smile on my face. "Destroyed it? Kevin. Do you hear yourself? This family was rotten from the inside out long ago. I didn't destroy it. I just pulled back the curtain for everyone to see the truth. You ask me why I did it? Have you ever asked yourself why Jessica had to do what she did to me?" My mind flashed back to the past, to the long, grueling days I had spent living under oppression and injustice. I remembered the times Jessica deliberately made my life difficult at the architecture firm we both worked at, though in different departments. She repeatedly spread malicious rumors that I had slept my way into the job, that I had no real talent, causing my colleagues to shun me and my superiors to misunderstand me. I remembered the time I was leading a crucial design project. Jessica intentionally leaked my blueprints to a competitor, causing our firm to lose the contract and me to nearly be fired. I cried and told Kevin everything, but all he said was, "There must be some misunderstanding. Jessica isn't like that. You're overthinking things." I remembered when Carol lost her gold necklace, and Jessica immediately pointed at me, saying, "She's the only outsider here, she must have stolen it." The whole family ganged up on me, berating me and searching my room. They found nothing, and only later was it discovered that Carol had forgetfully left it in the pocket of an old coat. But no one ever apologized to me, they just let it go, as if my humiliation meant nothing. I remembered the times Jessica borrowed money from me for investments and never paid it back. Whenever I gently brought it up, she would cause a scene, accusing me of being petty and materialistic, of looking down on her family. And every time, my mother-in-law and husband would side with her, telling me I needed to be more understanding. To sacrifice for the family. My sacrifice, my tolerance, was taken for granted. They saw me as an ATM, a naive fool to be manipulated, a trash can for them to dump all their jealousy and resentment into. "Kevin," I said, my voice calm but sharp as a razor. "Do you remember any of that? The times your sister falsely accused me, the nights I cried alone because of the injustice? Where were you then? What did you do? You just stayed silent. Your silence was more terrifying than her venomous words. It slowly killed my love and respect for you. So don't ask me why. Ask yourself, and ask your family." I stood up, unwilling to spend another second in that suffocating place. The night was still long, but my battle was essentially over. As for the rest, I would let them sort out the mess they themselves had created. Leaving the hospital, I didn't go home. The home I shared with Kevin now felt like a desolate battlefield, a place I no longer wanted to set foot in. I drove aimlessly through the night, the yellow streetlights streaking past the car window. Memories played back like a slow-motion film, taking me back to the early days when I first married into the Collins family. Back then, I was naive enough to believe that if I was sincere and devoted myself to my husband's family, I would be met with love and respect. I was so wrong. I met Kevin through a friend. He was gentle, quiet, with a stable office job. He wasn't an extraordinary man, but his simple, almost goofy nature brought a sense of peace to a girl like me, who was tired of complicated relationships. I loved him with a simple, unconditional love. When he proposed, I said yes, even though I knew his family situation was complex. My parents were initially hesitant, worried I would suffer, but seeing my determination, they relented. They gave me a very generous trust fund, which included a luxury condo and a substantial amount of savings, so I would have a safety net. But that financial security, instead of being a guarantee, became the root of all my tragedies. From the very beginning, I felt the difference in how my mother-in-law and sister-in-law treated me. Carol, my mother-in-law, was a sharp woman, accustomed to being praised. She would act loving towards me in front of Kevin and the relatives, but behind my back, she would make passive-aggressive remarks, constantly comparing me to her daughter, Jessica. My Jessica is so capable and resourceful. She can handle everything on her own. Girls these days have it so easy, they don't have to lift a finger, she'd say, watching me struggle in the kitchen, even as I tried my best to learn how to cook their favorite dishes. Jessica didn't bother with subtlety. She showed her envy openly. She was jealous of my looks, of my creative career as an architect, and especially of my affluent background. She felt inferior to me in every way, so she did everything she could to bring me down. At work, she spread rumors that I was just a pretty face who got the job through connections. At home, she constantly found fault with me, from the way I mopped the floor to the way I folded clothes. No matter how well I did something, in her eyes, it was a mess of mistakes. And when Kevin tried to defend me, Carol would immediately interject. "What are you saying, Kevin? Your sister is just trying to help her. Your wife is still young and inexperienced. It's right for her sister to teach her. You're a man, you need to know right from wrong. Don't just blindly defend your wife all the time." And Kevin, my weak-willed husband, would fall silent. His silence enabled the outrageous behavior of his mother and sister, making me an outcast in my own home. Then Mark appeared. He was Jessica's husband, a man with a polished appearance and a smooth tongue. He quickly won over my entire in-law family, especially Carol. She constantly praised her son-in-law for being talented and thoughtful, while calling her own son dull and slow. Initially, I had a good impression of Mark too. He was the only one in the family who would occasionally speak up for me, comforting me whenever Jessica bullied me. "Don't take what Jessica says to heart. She's just childish, she doesn't mean any harm. Just keep being yourself." At a time when I was so lonely and helpless, his words were like a soothing balm. I used to think that at least there was one reasonable person in this family. But I never suspected that was all part of his act. Carol and Jessica began their campaign to drain my trust fund. They were constantly pitching business ideas. "Grace, dear, your sister and I are thinking of opening a fashion boutique. If you have some savings, could you lend us some capital? It's a guaranteed profit. We'll give you a share. Grace, I have a great opportunity to invest in some land just outside the city. You just put in a few $100,000, and in a few months, you'll double or triple your money. Want to join in?" Wanting to get along with my in-laws, wanting to prove I was part of the family, I gave them the money without hesitation. Once, twice, then a third time. The amounts grew larger, but I never saw a single dollar of profit come back. Whenever I asked, they had a new excuse. "The market is tough right now. We need to reinvest the capital. Don't worry, your money is safe." And Kevin, my husband, he knew everything. But he would say to me, "Money isn't everything, Grace. As long as our family is happy and harmonious, that's what matters. Just think of it as helping Mom and Jessica. His weakness disappointed me to my core. I realized that in their eyes, I was just a cash cow to be milked dry. Kevin's love for me was probably not as strong as his fear of his mother and sister. I began to feel exhausted and disillusioned. I had thought about divorce but always hesitated. I still loved Kevin, still hoped that one day he would change, that he would grow up and learn to protect me. But that hope was ultimately crushed by him and his family. My life continued in a cycle of tolerance and fatigue until one day, about 3 months before the hotel incident, I started noticing strange things. They weren't major events, just small details, fleeting gestures that set off a cold suspicion in my woman's intuition. The relationship between my mother-in-law, Carol, and my brother-in-law, Mark, was becoming increasingly bizarre. They were excessively close. Mark was at our house almost every day, even when Jessica wasn't there. He'd say he was just passing by and wanted to visit Mom. He bought Carol all sorts of expensive gifts, from designer dresses to imported health supplements. He would even give her shoulder and foot massages, things that Kevin, her own son, rarely did. Carol, for her part, clearly enjoyed the attention. The way she looked at Mark was no longer the look of a mother-in-law to a son-in-law. It sparkled with a different kind of emotion, admiration, dependence, and something distinctly feminine. One time, I came downstairs from my home office to get a glass of water. The living room was dark, and I thought no one was home. But as I reached the staircase, I froze when I heard whispers. I pressed myself into the shadows and peered down. In the dim light filtering through the window, I saw Carol and Mark sitting side by side on the sofa. Carol's head was resting on Mark's shoulder, and he was stroking her hair. They were whispering about something. I could only catch fragments. Separate account. Our future. If Jessica finds out, we're done for. My heart stopped. I quickly and quietly retreated back upstairs, my mind a chaotic mix of disgust, confusion, and fear. From that day on, I started paying closer attention to them, and I discovered many more suspicious things. They had frequent, secretive phone calls. Whenever I appeared, they would abruptly hang up or change the subject. They had accidental touches that were full of hidden meaning. The way they looked at each other held a secret bond that an outsider could never understand. A terrible suspicion began to form in my mind. Could they be having an illicit affair? The thought made me shudder. It was too unimaginable, too contrary to all morality and reason. I tried to push the thought away, telling myself I was being paranoid. But their actions became more and more blatant. I knew I couldn't sit by any longer. I couldn't talk to Kevin about it. He would never believe me and would scold me for being delusional. I couldn't tell Jessica. She worshipped her mother and husband like gods. I had to find out the truth on my own. I decided I needed proof. I went online, researched, and bought a tiny spy camera disguised as a digital alarm clock. It could record continuously and stream the footage directly to my phone. I chose a day when the whole family was out, snuck into the living room, and placed the camera on a decorative shelf, a spot with a clear view of the entire room, especially the sofa where I had seen them together. And so began the tense and exhausting process of gathering evidence. Every day, I had to pretend that everything was normal, playing the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law and submissive wife, while my heart was in turmoil. I constantly checked my phone, watching the footage from the camera. For the first few days, nothing happened. They were still overly friendly, but nothing crossed the line. I started to think I was wrong, that I had been too suspicious. But then, one weekend afternoon, when Kevin and Jessica both had to work, and I had lied about meeting a friend, it happened. I was sitting in a coffee shop near the house, my eyes glued to my phone screen. And then, the scene I had both dreaded and anticipated unfolded. Mark came to the house. He and Carol, after making sure no one was home, dropped all pretense. They kissed each other passionately right there on the sofa. And then they did things I couldn't bear to watch. I trembled, a wave of nausea and pain washing over me. My worldview, my belief in the most basic moral values, completely shattered. I sat motionless in the coffee shop for hours, my mind a blank. I had the proof. But what was I supposed to do with it? Expose them? This family would be torn apart. And would anyone even believe me? Or would they just say I fabricated it to hurt them? I felt trapped and desperate. In that moment, I thought of my father. He was the only person I could trust, the only one I could turn to for advice. I saved the video file to a secure cloud drive and drove to my parents' house with a heavy heart. Jessica woke up in a sterile white space, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling glared down, making her squint. A throbbing pain at the back of her head and a bone-deep exhaustion were the first things she felt. But then, like a horrifying fast-forwarded film, the memories of the previous night came rushing back, crashing into her mind without mercy. The image of her revered mother and beloved husband entangled on the TV screen. The disgusted whispers of her relatives. The collapse into darkness. She shot up in bed, her breathing becoming ragged, her eyes wild as she looked around, searching for an escape from the nightmare. Kevin, who had been by her side all night, gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Jess, you're awake. Calm down, it's okay." His face was gaunt, his eyes dark with exhaustion from a sleepless night spent worrying about her and tormented by the chaotic truth. "Okay. How is any of this okay?" Jessica shoved his hand away. Her voice was hoarse and weak but still laced with hysteria. "Where's Mom? Where's my husband? And where is that bitch, Grace? You get her in here right now. I'm going to rip her to shreds. It was her. She faked that video to destroy our family. You have to believe me, Kevin. Mom would never do that. And Mark would never betray me. It's all fake, it's all a lie." She remained stubborn, desperately clinging to the fragile belief that her perfect world hadn't crumbled, that this was all just a vicious plot hatched by me. The truth was too brutal, and she would rather believe a lie than face it. Just then, the door to the hospital room creaked open. I walked in, calm and silent. My appearance was like a lit match, instantly reigniting the fire of fury inside Jessica. "You venomous snake! You still have the nerve to show your face here? Who let you in? Get out! Get out of my sight right now." She reached for the water glass on the bedside table, intending to throw it at me, but Kevin quickly stopped her. I was unfazed by her rage. I walked slowly to her bedside, holding the tablet that had, just the night before, become the weapon that exposed the truth. "I didn't come here to argue with you, Jessica. I just came to show you how foolish and blind you've been." I placed the tablet on the table and unlocked the screen. This time, it wasn't the explicit video. It was a series of screenshots of text messages. They were private, intimate conversations between two accounts named My Dearest Carol and My Love, Mark. I swiped slowly across the screen so Jessica could read every single word. The things they said to each other were even more disgusting and damaging than any naked image. "My dearest Carol, my love, are you coming over today? Jessica just called to brag about her bonus. Looks like we'll have more money to spend soon. My foolish, foolish daughter. My love Mark, I can't wait to see you, my dear. My wife is being so annoying, always asking where I'm going. I have to lie and say I'm meeting clients. Only with you do I feel like my true self, Carol. My dearest Carol. Maybe we should find a way to get rid of Grace. She's such a thorn in my side. If we kick her out, Kevin will listen to me more. Then all the family assets will be ours. My love, Mark. Don't you worry. I already have a plan. Just leave it to your favorite son-in-law to handle. Love you so much." Jessica read, her eyes glued to the screen, her pupils dilating in horror. Her face went from flushed with anger to pale, then to a deathly white. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She raised a trembling hand, pointing at the screen, then at me, then at herself. Her worldview, her beliefs, everything she had held as gospel, was now shattering into a million pieces. The mother she worshipped, whom she had always defended, had called her own daughter foolish. The husband she adored, of whom she had always been so proud, had called her an annoying wife. And worse, they had conspired together, deceiving her, using her, and planning to drain the family of its assets. In their eyes, she was nothing more than a tool, a pawn. This collapse was far more devastating than the first. She didn't scream or rage anymore. She just sat there, motionless like a wooden doll. Then, suddenly, she began to laugh. It was a mournful, desolate laugh, a sound more painful than any cry. She laughed and cried at the same time, tears and snot streaming down her face. Ha ha. Foolish. Yes, I am a fool. A cow led around by my own mother and husband without a clue. Ha ha ha. Kevin stood by, watching his sister descend into a state of near madness, his heart breaking. He turned to me, his eyes filled with regret and self-loathing. He knew. If only he had listened to me, if only he had trusted me just once, perhaps things wouldn't have reached this tragic end. I didn't stay to witness any more of her breakdown. My purpose was achieved. The truth, however cruel, had been revealed. I quietly turned and left the room, leaving behind a space thick with the stench of betrayal, ruin, and insanity. The road ahead for Jessica, I knew, would be long, dark, and filled with torment. Jessica was discharged after a few days of psychological treatment. She was no longer hysterical, but she was a different person. The vibrant, arrogant woman of before was gone, replaced by a frighteningly silent and cold demeanor. The first thing she did when she got home was to call a family meeting. A family trial, where the most disgusting sins would be judged. That evening, everyone gathered in the living room. The atmosphere was as heavy as a funeral. Jessica sat alone in a large armchair, her eyes swollen and vacant, staring straight ahead. She was like a judge, waiting for the accused. Kevin sat near me, but a vast distance separated us. He didn't dare look at me or his sister. He just stared at the floor like a sinner awaiting his sentence. Carol and Mark were forced to sit across from Jessica. They no longer dared to look at each other or put on an act. Fear and guilt were etched onto their faces. Jessica broke the silence. Her voice was hoarse, devoid of any emotion. Mom, I only have one question for you. Why? The simple question carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. Carol flinched. She looked up at her daughter, her lips trembling. After days of breakdown, she seemed to have prepared a new script. She knew denial was useless, so she chose the path of pity. Suddenly, she slid off her chair and knelt on the floor in front of Jessica. Jessica, my daughter. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Please, forgive your sinful mother. She began to wail, a performance even more dramatic than before. I know I was wrong, but I had my own struggles. After your father died, I had to carry this whole family on my own. I acted strong on the outside, but inside, I was so lonely, so empty. I'm just a weak woman who needed a shoulder to lean on. And then, Mark came along. He cared for me, he comforted me. I lost my way. I couldn't control myself. I was wrong, I deserved to be punished. Please, my daughter, don't disown me. I can't live without you. She cried and pleaded, trying to use motherly love to appeal to her daughter's compassion. But Jessica just stared at her with eyes as cold as ice. The betrayal had frozen all emotion within her. Her heart was dead. Seeing that his mother-in-law's pity play wasn't working, Mark, with the true nature of a coward, decided to play his final card, shifting the blame. Jessica. I know I was wrong. I'm truly sorry. But, this wasn't entirely my fault, he stammered. His eyes darting around. It was your mother. She seduced me first. I'm just a normal man. How could I resist that kind of temptation? I tried to refuse, but she kept coming on to me. I was a victim in this too. You have to believe me. Smack. A sharp slap echoed through the room, but the one who delivered it wasn't Jessica. It was Kevin. For the first time in his life, my meek husband acted like a man. He had shot up from his seat, lunged forward, and slapped Mark across the face with all his might. You animal. How dare you say that? You slept with my mother, you betrayed my sister, and now you're blaming a woman old enough to be your own mother? Are you even human? Kevin's slap was the trigger. All hell broke loose. Carol, accused by Mark, forgot her pity act. She jumped up and started clawing at him. You bastard! You ungrateful swine! It was you! You sweet-talked me, you seduced me. You made all those promises, and now you're trying to deny it? I won't let you get away with this. The two illicit lovers were now at each other's throats like wild animals. They spewed out all their dirty secrets, all the despicable schemes they had concocted together. They cursed each other with the foulest language. The rest of the family sat in stunned silence, witnessing the most depraved and disgusting display. Jessica listened, a bitter, desolate smile twisting her lips. Kevin stood frozen, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The home they were once so proud of, the respectable facade they had so carefully maintained, was now in ruins. Its moral foundation had rotted from within, and tonight, right here in this living room, it had completely collapsed before their very eyes. Pushed into a corner, scorned by the entire family, Mark's true, thuggish nature finally emerged. He was no longer the charming son-in-law or the cowardly lover. He was a wounded animal, ready to bite anyone who got in his way. Shut up! All of you! Mark roared, his voice filled with rage and desperation, drowning out the accusations. The room fell silent. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and stood up straight, his bloodshot eyes scanning the room. Fine. You want to treat me like this? Then don't blame me for being ruthless. You want to push me off a cliff? Let me tell you, if I go down, this whole family is coming down with me. He walked to his briefcase, snapped it open, and pulled out a thick file, slamming it onto the coffee table with a loud thud. Open your eyes and see. Did you really think I married into this family just to serve this old woman and my idiot wife? You were wrong. Kevin shakily picked up the file. The more he read, the paler his face became. Jessica and the others crowded around to look, and then, they all froze. It was a complete dossier of the Collins family company's illegal business activities over the past years, ever since Mark had married in and Carol had given him control over a portion of the finances. It contained fake contracts, fraudulent invoices proving massive tax evasion to the tune of millions of dollars, evidence of manufacturing substandard products and labeling them as high-end goods to deceive consumers, and, most damning of all, a detailed list of bribes paid to various officials to cover up their crimes. And all of this, Mark sneered, pointing a finger directly at his former mother-in-law, was done under the direct orders of my dear Carol. You think you can deny it? I have audio recordings of our conversations for every deal. I have copies of every single bribe payment. I've been preparing for this day for a long time, just in case someone decided to betray me. Carol staggered, clutching the arm of a chair to stay upright. She couldn't believe that the lover she had trusted so completely had been quietly setting a deadly trap for her all along. She had nurtured a viper in her own home, and now it was turning to strike. Now, I'm giving you two options. Listen carefully, Mark's voice was as cold as steel. 1. You give me $2 million. Cash. Within 24 hours. I'll take the money, disappear from this country, and it will be as if I never existed. All of this evidence goes with me. 2. You don't pay, or you try any funny business like calling the cops. An exact copy of this file will be sent to the IRS and the FBI. Your company will go bankrupt, your assets will be frozen. And you, he pointed at Carol again, as the mastermind of tax evasion and bribery, will be spending at least 15 years in federal prison. You have 24 hours to decide. The clock is ticking. With that, Mark calmly sat down, lit a cigarette, and blew a smoke ring into the air. He had completely turned the tables. From the accused, he had become the one holding the power of life and death over the entire family. A bone-chilling silence filled the house. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with nothing but panic, fear, and despair. They were trapped, cornered by the very sins they had committed. Just as the family was drowning in panic and desperation, with no idea how to respond to Mark's end threat, I, who had been a silent observer throughout, calmly stood up. All eyes immediately turned to me. They probably expected me to gloat, to laugh at their misery. But no. My face was completely serene. $2 million. Do you really think you're worth that much, Mark? I spoke, my clear, steady voice cutting through the tense silence with a strange authority that made Mark frown. He sneered. Well, look who's talking. My dear, former sister-in-law. What's this? Are you going to use your trust fund to save this rotten family? Be my guest. I ignored his taunt, looking directly at Carol, who was sitting in a daze. Carol, I know you've never considered me family, but this company was Dad's life's work. He's gone now. Are you really going to let it all be destroyed by a vile, despicable man like this? My words seemed to strike the last remaining chord of sentiment in Carol's heart. She looked up at me, her eyes a complex mix of shame, helplessness, and a flicker of hope. She didn't speak, just shook her head slightly, fresh tears welling up. Good, I said decisively. Then I turned back to face Mark. Mark, you think you're the only one who holds the company's dirty secrets? You're far too confident. You may know about the tax evasion, but there are things far more important, things that will decide your fate, that you know nothing about. Without another word, I walked to my late father-in-law's study, a room that had long been covered in a thin layer of dust. I went to the old bookshelf and tapped a specific book. With a soft click, a secret compartment opened. I unlocked the small safe inside something only my late father-in-law and I knew the combination to, and took out an old, yellowed ledger and a small USB drive. I returned to the living room and placed them on the table next to Mark's dossier. The whole family held their breath, unsure of what I was doing. This is the company's real set of books, recording every single transaction and cash flow for the past 10 years, written by Dad himself, I said, my voice filled with respect for my father-in-law. Before Kevin and I got married, he secretly called me into his study and entrusted this to me. He said he felt uneasy, that he was afraid his life's work would one day be destroyed by insatiable greed. He trusted me, an outsider, more than his own family. And he was right. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. The screen immediately displayed a series of neatly organized files. And this is a special gift, just for you, Mark. This is all the evidence of how you took advantage of Carol's trust to embezzle and siphon funds from the company. For the past 2 years, you set up shell corporations, signed fake contracts with your own company, and inflated the costs of materials to pocket the difference. Do you know how much you've stolen? I paused, looking directly into Mark's eyes, which were now starting to show panic. The total comes to over $3 million. Significantly more than the $2 million you're using to blackmail this family. Mark's face went from red with anger to a deathly pale. He couldn't believe that all his actions had been under my surveillance. He thought he was a cunning fox, but it turned out he was just a mouse running in circles inside a trap I had set long ago. You want to call the police so we all go down together? Fine by me. I was just about to do that myself. I calmly picked up my phone, unlocked it, and dialed 911. Hello? I need to be connected to the FBI's white-collar crime division. My name is Grace Collins. I'd like to report a case of major corporate embezzlement, accompanied by blackmail. Don't! Mark screamed desperately. He lunged to grab my phone, but it was too late. Kevin and some of the other male relatives had already jumped up and restrained him. And in the distance, the unmistakable wail of police sirens grew closer and closer, like a death knell for Mark's freedom. Narrator's perspective and commentary, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, the story is no longer just about personal revenge. It has ascended to a new level. Grace is not only taking down the villain. She is attempting to salvage the legacy of her late father-in-law. Cleaning out the cancer that has been eating away at the family business. Her actions teach a profound lesson. In the face of evil, silence and submission only allow it to fester. Only intelligence, courage, and meticulous preparation can lead to victory. Grace teaches us that justice doesn't always arrive on its own. Sometimes, we must stand up and fight for it, not just for ourselves, but for those who have passed and for the values we hold dear. The police sirens grew louder, finally stopping right outside the Collins mansion. The heavy iron gates swung open, not for esteemed guests, but for law enforcement. Mark was handcuffed and led to a squad car in front of his stunned family. He wasn't screaming or posturing anymore. He just hung his head, his body trembling with fear and despair. The chess game he was so confident he would win had ended in a checkmate he never saw coming. Delivered by the daughter-in-law he and his family had always underestimated. After the police car carrying Mark and all his dirty secrets disappeared, Carol truly collapsed. The succession of shocks was too much for her to bear. Her lover, her accomplice, the son-in-law she adored, had been arrested before her eyes. The family company, the legacy of her late husband which she had tried to maintain even through corrupt means, was now facing bankruptcy and a full-scale investigation. Her beloved daughter, Jessica, sat there looking at her with empty eyes, devoid of any maternal love, filled only with resentment and contempt. She couldn't handle it. She began to scream, not curses at me, but meaningless, hysterical shrieks. "No! Give me back my son-in-law! Give me back my company! Give it all back! I'm innocent! I'm innocent!" She pointed wildly into the air, her eyes bloodshot. She lunged at the table, grabbing Mark's dossier and tearing it to shreds, as if that could erase her crimes. But her body no longer obeyed her mind. She staggered, her limbs began to convulse, and she suddenly collapsed to the floor, mumbling incoherently. One side of her face began to droop, distorting grotesquely. A stroke. The extreme psychological shock, the rage, guilt, and terror had caused a blood vessel in her brain to burst. Once again, ambulance sirens wailed in front of the mansion, but this time, the atmosphere was thick with tragedy and despair. We rushed her to the hospital in critical condition. The doctors said she was lucky to be alive, but the after-effects would be severe. They were right. Carol survived, but she was left permanently unable to walk or speak properly. She was paralyzed on one side of her body, confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life. But the most terrifying part wasn't the physical decline, it was the mental one. Her mind was no longer clear. She drifted in and out of consciousness, living in her own world. In her lucid moments, she would just sit silently in her wheelchair, staring out the window with vacant eyes, not recognizing anyone. But in her delirious states, especially at night, she would talk incessantly. She spoke of her past sins, things she had buried deep when she was sane. She recounted how she and Mark had planned to cheat me out of my money, then would break down sobbing. She talked about the times she had falsely accused me, then would clasp her hands and bow to the empty air as if begging for forgiveness. She confessed through tears that she had always been jealous of me, jealous of my happy family, my loving father, my good education, all the things she never had in her own difficult life. Her ramblings were the rawest confessions, pouring out now that the defensive walls of lies and pride had crumbled. There, in that hospital bed, half lucid, she had stripped herself bare, revealing a person who was both detestable and pathetic. The months that followed were the darkest and heaviest of Kevin's life. His world was turned completely upside down. The once grand mansion was now cold and empty, occupied only by him and a few housekeepers. His days became a tiresome, repetitive cycle, mornings at the company dealing with police investigations, afternoons at the hospital, caring for his semi-conscious mother, and evenings visiting his broken sister and his disgraced former brother-in-law in jail. The entire weight, responsibility, and shame of a family in ruins now rested on the shoulders of a man who had always been sheltered and weak. It was during these desperate times that Kevin truly realized my value, realized what he had lost. He remembered the days when I was by his side, always taking care of the family, quietly solving problems, and offering sound advice for his work. But he had taken it all for granted. He hadn't cherished it. He had allowed his mother's selfishness and his sister's jealousy to cloud his judgment, hurting me time and again with his silence and indifference. He realized that the wife he had doubted and neglected was the only one with the strength and intelligence to steer the family ship through the storm. But he had cast his captain overboard. One late evening, as I was returning home from my office, I had moved out right after the incident. I found Kevin waiting for me. He looked gaunt and exhausted, having aged 10 years. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He saw me, and a faint flicker of hope appeared in his sunken eyes. He said nothing, just walked up to me, and slowly, deliberately, knelt down. His sudden action made me take a step back. "Grace, I'm sorry," he cried, no longer holding back. The tears of a man who had truly recognized his mistakes. Tears of regret and helplessness. "I was wrong, Grace. I'm a terrible husband, a coward. I didn't protect you. I let you suffer so much injustice alone. I regret it so much. I can't sleep at night. Your face, your words, they haunt me. Can you forgive me? Give me one last chance to start over?" He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "I know my family caused you so much pain, but they've paid the price now. I promise, I'll change. I won't let anyone bully you ever again. Let's forget the past and rebuild our family together. Can we do that, Grace?" I looked at the man kneeling at my feet, the man I had once loved with all my heart. I no longer felt anger. All I felt was a profound weariness and distance. The love I had for him was gone. It had died during all the times he chose silence when I was being bullied. It had died on the night he stood by and watched as his family humiliated me at the hotel. It had been killed by his weakness and neglect, and it could not be revived. "Kevin, get up," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Your regret has come too late. When a mirror is broken, no matter how you piece it back together, the cracks will always remain. Our relationship is the same. I don't hate you anymore, but I don't love you either. Let's just end it here. Peacefully." I said my piece, then turned and walked into my building, giving him no further chance to plead. As I closed the door behind me, I was also closing the final chapter of my tragic marriage. Forgiveness might be possible, but restarting a relationship where the trust had been utterly destroyed was not. The court proceedings for our divorce were swift and quiet, without any disputes. Kevin agreed to all of my terms unconditionally. With clear evidence of my personal assets and the damages I had suffered, the court ruled entirely in my favor. I received all of my original assets, including the luxury condo my parents had given me, and a significant sum in damages for the financial and emotional distress his family had caused. The day I held the final divorce decree in my hands, walking out of the courthouse, I looked up at the sky. It was a brilliant, clear blue, without a single cloud. I took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh air, the scent of freedom. I didn't feel sad or heartbroken. I just felt an incredible sense of relief, like a bird that had been caged for too long, finally set free to soar into the vast blue sky, free to sing its own song. My tragic marriage was officially over. A dark, exhausting chapter of my life had been closed for good. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, my life had turned a new page entirely, one more vibrant and full of life than I could have ever dreamed of in my darkest days. I was no longer the quiet, dependent architect who buried herself in blueprints. I took my accumulated capital, my experience, my talent, and the hard-won lessons from the storm, and I founded my own architecture and interior design firm. I named it Sunrise. The name wasn't just a brand, it was a declaration to myself that after every dark storm, the sun will rise again, more brilliant and powerful than before. With unique design concepts that blended different architectural styles and a professional, meticulous work ethic, my firm quickly made a name for itself. I didn't have to look for clients, they came to me through word of mouth and the reputation of my completed projects. I landed major contracts with prestigious corporations, designing luxury coastal resorts, smart office buildings, and opulent villas for the elite. I became an independent, successful, and self-made businesswoman. I had built my own empire, one founded on talent, sweat, and relentless effort, not on schemes and dirty tricks. I found true joy and meaning in the work I was passionate about, in the recognition of my clients and the respect of my peers. As for my former in-laws, they faced the inevitable consequences of their actions. The Collins family company, the glamorous facade for their illegal business dealings, collapsed soon after I exposed them to the authorities. Their tax evasion, money laundering, and bribery were all brought to light. The company declared bankruptcy, leaving behind a mountain of debt. The grand mansion, the stage for so many lies and deceptions, was seized by the bank. All their remaining assets, from luxury cars to designer goods, were liquidated to pay off their debts. Kevin, having lost everything, his wife, his family, his career, had to move into a small rental apartment in the suburbs. He was no longer the coddled rich kid. He worked a mundane office job at a small company, his meager salary barely enough to cover his living expenses and his mother's medical bills. The burdens of life had worn away his polished appearance, leaving behind a haggard, silent man who looked 10 years older. Sometimes, people would see him sitting alone at a cheap diner after work, staring blankly into space, perhaps lost in regret. But his belated regret could not change his reality. Carol, after a long health battle with inadequate funds and care, was eventually moved by Kevin into a state-run hospice. She lived out her final days in solitude, pain, and oblivion. In her rare moments of lucidity, she would sit in her wheelchair and stare out the window, tears streaming down her face, disfigured by illness. Perhaps in those moments she regretted her actions. But it was all too late. It was a sad, tragic, but ultimately just end for a life filled with calculation, selfishness, and mistakes. Each member of that family tasted the bitter fruit they deserved. 2 years later, my company, Sunrise, continued to grow, establishing a strong presence not only domestically but also internationally. I had found success in my career, but more importantly, I had found peace and balance in my soul. I wasn't rushing to find a new love, but I remained open to new relationships and sincere friendships. I had learned to love and value myself first. I spent more time with my parents, taking them on trips around the world, making up for the worry I had caused them. I also dedicated a portion of my company's profits to philanthropic work, building schools, and community centers in underprivileged areas. This work brought me a quiet joy and a sense of purpose that money and fame never could. One rainy afternoon, returning to the city from a project on the coast, my car was stuck in a traffic jam caused by an accident up ahead. While waiting, I was scrolling through work emails on my phone when I happened to glance out the window. Under the awning of a rundown roadside diner, a thin woman in shabby clothes was huddled on an old plastic chair, taking shelter from the rain. Her face was gaunt and darkened by the sun, her short hair was dry and matted with rain. Her eyes were vacant, staring into the downpour without focus. Even though she had changed so much, so haggard she was almost unrecognizable, some instinct, some vague familiarity in her posture, told me who it was. It was Jessica. She was no longer the sharp, powerful woman she once was. The confident swagger was gone. The money I had given her for treatment must have run out long ago. The harshness of life had worn away all her former glamour, leaving only a pitiful shell, a faint shadow of her past. She sat there alone, isolated amidst the bustling flow of life. No one paid any attention to her. She didn't notice me or the luxury car parked just a few feet away, separated by a pane of rain-streaked glass. She was lost in her own world, a world likely filled with exhaustion and hopelessness. The light ahead turned green, and the traffic began to move. I gave a small nod to my driver, and the car glided forward. I didn't stop. I had no intention of getting out to ask how she was, to offer pity, or help one more time. Her life, her path, her choices, I no longer wanted to be a part of it. Her presence stirred no emotion in me. I drove past her as I would a stranger. The hatred, the contempt, even the pity I once felt, had all vanished, replaced by a strange, calm indifference. The story of that family had finally, truly ended in my mind. A sad but profound conclusion about the law of karma. You reap what you sow. They had sown seeds of lies, envy, and selfishness, and now they were harvesting the bitter fruits of ruin, illness, and misery. And I, after bravely navigating the greatest storm of my life, had found my own sunrise. A sunrise that was clear, brilliant, and peaceful. I knew that ahead of me lay a long and open road, where I would be the one to write the next chapters of my life. A life where I was in control. A life filled with light and meaning. Final commentary. Dear listeners, as we reflect on Grace's tumultuous yet ultimately triumphant journey, let us absorb its lessons. When the door to room 309 opened and that fateful video played, it wasn't just Jessica who collapsed, it was the facade of false morality, the veneer of a perfect family. This story is more than a tale of revenge, it's a stark illustration of the consequences of greed, envy, and moral decay. Jessica's story is a cautionary tale. Envy is a poison that consumes the one who wields it. The affair between Carol and Mark is a shocking reminder that when moral boundaries are crossed, the fallout is devastating, shattering the sacred trust of family. But the brightest star in this story is Grace. She represents the modern woman, intelligent, resilient, and unwilling to be a victim. Her methodical gathering of evidence was not paranoia, it was a necessary act of self-preservation in a toxic environment. Her story teaches all women to be vigilant, to be financially independent, and to have the strength to fight back not with malice, but with truth. Let's also consider Kevin, whose weakness and inaction served as the fertile ground for this tragedy to grow. His story is a lesson for all partners: your spouse is your priority. Your silence in the face of injustice is a betrayal more cutting than any harsh word. Ultimately, the downfall of Grace's enemies and her subsequent rise affirm our belief in justice and karma. They reaped what they sowed. And Grace, by living with integrity and courage, found her peace and success. Life is fair, it doesn't take everything from someone, nor does it give everything, unless it is deserved. Let us all look at our own lives. Let's cherish our loved ones, live with sincerity, and never let temptation compromise our character. If you find yourself in a difficult situation, do not despair. Believe that the light of justice is always there, as long as you are strong and wise enough to walk towards it. Let us build our families into true havens of love and respect, not battlegrounds of deceit. Life is short. Instead of wasting time on hatred, let's spend it on love, on contribution, and on enjoying life's simple joys. Let's live with pure hearts and bright minds. Thank you for listening. We hope this story has provided you with valuable insights and the motivation to live a better, more courageous life.